So in this panel discussion, I would like to welcome on stage, so to speak, our four panelists. We are talking about the connection between crisis, in our case, it's the current pandemic, and innovation, and how it relates to different fields of innovation. And therefore, we welcome on stage Joana Breidenbach, representing betterplace.org, Alan Alexander from the University of Exeter, Henning Breuer, UXBerlin Innovation Consulting, and HMKW University in Berlin, and Klaus Fichter, founder of the Borderstep Institute and professor at Oldenburg University. So I hope we can see all, yes, so I can see all of you now. Maybe as a little warm-up and as a little starter for this panel discussion, I'd like to ask you please to introduce yourself in roughly 1 minute. And Joana, maybe you go first.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so my name is Joana Breidenbach, and I studied cultural anthropology. And in my first career, I wrote many books about cultural globalization and how the world's diversity changes with every one of us being connected. And then in 2007, I founded an online fundraising platform called betterplace.org, which is by now Germany's largest social platform for NGOs, which use us for their fundraising. And I also have been founding a think tank, which is called the Better Place Lab, where we look at how digital communication changes the work of the social sector. So my field of innovation really is digital social innovation. How can we use technology to make a more socially just and sound environmental and sustainable world? But really, when I look at what my niche in innovation is, I'm really interested not only in the outside innovation, what the kind of new business models, the value chains we create, but I'm really interested in the inner innovation. What does that mean for us as human beings? How can we as humans be innovative? Because I believe that the challenges which we face in a digital global world are very different from an industrial national world. And, we humans have to change as well in order to be innovative. And that's my focus.
Thanks a lot, Joana. Now in alphabetical order, Alan.
Okay, I'm Alan Alexander from the University of Exeter Business School. I've just been reminded that when you post something online, it stays there forever. I'm not quite sure how old the photo of me was on the first slide, but I don't look quite as good as that anymore. My focus, my research focus is around the transition to a circular economy. And I think we've had a number of sessions and a number of thought-leading sessions at this conference, which has been really enlightening, and it's brought home to me a couple of points. The first is that this research agenda for the circular economy is about two steps. It's about perhaps developing things which are transitional and may lead us toward a different state where our economy is no longer take, make, dispose. But it's also important to understand that there's this transformative state that we really don't understand yet. And if we're able to get to that position, perhaps thinking back to kind of Rita McGrath's speech, maybe that's more of a wish than a possibility. But I think it's important to reflect that the toolkits that we have and the content that we're looking at currently is all about making a change, whether it be a change that's branded as circular economy, a change that's branded as sustainability, a change that's branded against value-based innovation. I think the destination is the place that we need to be focusing on. So that's very much where my research is at this time.
Okay, so it will be interesting to learn more about the destination you're having on mind. Thanks a lot. So alphabetically now, Henning, you're the next.
Yes, hello. So I'm Henning Breuer. Those of you attending the conference probably saw me in a couple of these sessions over the last couple of days. I'm a professor for business psychology here at HMKW, University of Applied Sciences, for media communication and management. And I'm also running a small business consultancy named UXBerlin. And yeah, so together with Klaus and the Borderstep Institute, we have the honor of hosting this year's ISPIM conference virtually this year, locally in Berlin next year. And we also had the honor of contributing the focal themes of this conference: values-based and sustainability-oriented innovation. And this year also we opened up a new special interest group on values-based and sustainable innovation, and dealt with the questions of how to drive innovation in general and sustainable innovation in particular, based on values, what people consider important inside the organizations, but also outside. Yeah, maybe so much for now.
Thanks a lot, Klaus.
Yeah, hello everybody. Klaus Fichter. I'm a professor for innovation management and sustainability at the University of Oldenburg in Germany. And so I have an academic background, but you might also consider myself as a scientific entrepreneur, because some 15 years ago, I started an outside university research institute called the Borderstep Institute for Innovation and Sustainability, located in Berlin. And it nicely grew within the last 15 years. So we're a team of 20, 25 people now, and doing applied research, especially on sustainability innovation, on sustainable entrepreneurship, green startups, and one of our focal areas is also on digitalization and sustainability. And maybe just one example, we calculated what is the difference between a physical conference, a physical ISPIM conference, and the virtual ISPIM conference. So we calculated the greenhouse gas emissions connected to the different types, and we found out that a virtual ISPIM conference saves 95% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So normally it's about 1,000 tons of CO2. And this was reduced significantly to only 50. So there's quite an impact, and that's also what we aim at, bringing excellent knowledge with an impact. So knowledge with impact is our kind of slogan. That's why we also included in this year's virtual ISPIM conference the Borderstep Impact Forum. And we're especially interested in how do different things we do. Joana Breidenbach was mentioning our individual way of living. How does this impact sustainability? For example, greenhouse gas emissions, etc. So that's the stuff we do, and we're very proud to be one of the partners and also to be one of the sponsors of next year's event in Berlin.
Okay, thanks a lot for this first round of already inspiring introductions. Let's get into the topics. So we have to somehow build a bridge between ISPIM 2020 and 21. And the question is, what did we learn this year? What do we still have to learn? And what do we have to think about or consider in next year's conference? And so our times are currently shaped by this corona crisis, obviously. That's why we are meeting here in this virtual environment. And then the topic is also the higher level topic is innovating in times of crisis. So one could wonder what times of crisis mean for innovation, for creativity, for innovation management. And I found an interesting Forbes article, an online edition from March, where the author is making a connection between crisis, in particular pandemics, and innovation. And there was a very strong example, which was the Great Plague, Black Death, 14th century, which killed, according to estimations, 30 to 60% of the European population. So that's the very dark side of this crisis. But then he goes on and argues that this was kind of the birth of modern society, because so many people died. Human labor became a luxury, became a premium. So wages were rising, the poor get wealthier, literacy was increasing. And his conclusion, I don't know if you agree, but it's what this author is saying, is that because of this development, the hierarchy of society started to flatten. So that's why he said this is kind of the birth of modern society, which is a very interesting interpretation of this crisis, Great Plague, Black Death. And the question is now, in this Corona crisis, what kind of challenges, downsides, but also opportunities do you see? What kind of connections can you make between the current crisis in which we are, in your particular domain in which you are active, in which you are an innovator in practice or maybe an innovation researcher? So I'd like to have a kind of an opening statement or thought from each of you, and then we could open and have kind of a discussion in which you connect to other panelists. So again, Joana, would you like to start and share your thoughts about this current crisis relates to what you're doing and to particular forms of innovation you're concerned with?
Yeah, so, maybe I'm just only going to bring one example of a challenge and one of the opportunity I see. So definitely a challenge which I observe is that, many impact businesses in the last few years have not opted to be normal NGOs and to rely on grants from foundations or the public sector, but they have developed business models. So they are market-based innovations, and social entrepreneurship is quite very big, not only in Germany, but in Europe and in the world. But exactly these kinds of new companies are the ones which are suffering most at the moment in the current crisis. So I find that really very devastating, because most of these businesses, have broken away. Many of the NGOs, many of the impact businesses I know do rely on giving workshops, giving talks, having customers, providing services, and we cherish them for that, because they are innovative, they are, using the market for social good. At the same time, of course, with the lockdown in many situations, all of these markets have been destroyed. And what is really challenging is that the rescue packages, which our governments, very nicely provided in many ways, don't fit to these kinds of businesses. And so we see massive, massive destruction right now, because so many of these companies can't, at the moment, many of them are really fighting for survival, because they can't take credits, for example, and because they are not profit oriented, they also don't have a financial buffer. So that's, I find, a real challenge. At the same time, just to give you one example of where I see a huge opportunity, if I relate this to my inner work and interest, is that with so many people now working in home office and work becoming so much more decentralized, we are now experiencing a shift from, future of work, very agile work methods, decentralized and self-organized, which was so far in a niche. Now this has become mainstream. And with this new experience of people, office culture, which is a relic of the industrial age. It doesn't fit, our way to work doesn't fit the global digital age anymore. So there I see a real opportunity where we can upgrade the way how we work, the new balance between private life, professional life, and all of these questions, and to create a much more meaningful way to work for many, many people.
Okay, thanks a lot. So already a lot of questions, but let's wait a moment. So to bring some variety, let's start the other way around. So Klaus, maybe now you're second.
Yes, so you ask, how does this time of crisis connect to the central concepts and topics we are working at? Our central concept is sustainability. And actually, if you're a little bit familiar with the concept of sustainability, it's very old. It's more than 300 years old. So we do not speak about sustainability just since the 1980s with the Brundtland report and etc., but it's much older. So why did the inventor of the concept of sustainability, it was a German guy named Hans Karl von Kallowitz, why did he think about sustainability at that time? And the background was that he was responsible for the silver mining in the southern part of Germany. And all of a sudden they didn't have enough wood anymore for their mining. So he started to think about how could we have a sustainable forestry to have a resource for a longer time. And so the start of thinking about sustainability 300 years ago was crisis. So the concept of sustainability is always connected to some various kind of crisis. So for me, the connection is very obvious and not new at all. And I like to also mention one concept which is being mentioned a lot these days, which is also not new, But it's interesting that we talk about resilience these days so much. It's an old concept, and we also do climate change research, and in climate change research, resilience is one core concept. How should we adapt to the change of climate, and how could we succeed in keeping up certain basic functions so that we don't have breakdowns? So the concept of resilience is a core concept. And was Joana just mentioning that a lot of social ventures, NGOs, have a big problem now, also raises a question of sustainability, of how can I be, as an organization, be sustainable in the sense of resilience, not just in the sense of ecological, environmental sustainability, but also in the sense of resilience, being able to cope with this kind of massive attacks, so to speak, may it be pandemia, may it be climate change. And I think so that the concept of resilience basically is the first and probably most important sustainability principle. And I think we should talk about that in the forthcoming month, also next year when we meet in Berlin. And I love to discuss that because there's a very strong link. So I think there's a very close connection.
Thanks a lot, Klaus. Henning, you'd like to contribute?
Yes, so connection between the crisis and what we are focusing on, which is the values-based innovation management approach. I'd start from the observation that I think the current crisis gives us a very strong case for taking a values-based approach to managing innovation. So it shows that values, like in this case, values of health and caring not just for one's own health, but even for the health of the most vulnerable, can be a strong driver for cultural change, for habitual changes, and for innovation. So associated innovations range from very simple forms of fashion producers suddenly producing masks to football stadiums, as we saw also here in the conference, populated by portraits of soccer fans, up to all of us going online to conferences like we are doing here, or for actually everything else, from yoga up to virtual retreats that actually one of us just returned from. So I think it also demonstrates the functions that values can play in such a process, which is providing a heuristic to come up with new ideas, to integrate diverse stakeholders into a concerted action, and to provide a sense of direction in the face of uncertainty. And resulting challenges from that, from this values-based point of view, are of course the regular business challenges. So what's happening to customer values? Which of these changes we're experiencing here are really long-term, which are wearing out or kind of slowly going back into a so-called new normal. And the less obvious question, and I think the greater challenge, is how we can get beyond this current mode of coping with crisis to what's giving the conference topic for next year, also to caring for our common future. For instance, these issues of mitigating climate change, preserving biodiversity that we already mentioned. So how can we make sure that sustainability is not just a title of an annual report or even of a conference, but an integral part of innovation practices, methods, and a decisive measure for innovation success? So that would be the challenges and the questions that I'd like to work on also until we meet again next year in Berlin.
Thanks a lot. So, Joana, I'm just taking notes. What's to be taken to Berlin 21 next year? So, for you, I noted down new forms of working could be a key topic, a new topic. Klaus, you contributed the notion of resilience. You put some emphasis on this. Henning, so what's your key concept, your keyword I should note down for Berlin 2021?
Yeah, so what I'm wondering kind of is, or what I would probably consider the $1 trillion question for the upcoming year is, and how far we can manage to instill the sense of urgency that hopefully is getting us out of this current Corona crisis now, and transfer that to values relating to sustainability, like intergenerational justice or social equality. So how can we break down these long-term challenges into real manageable tasks in the shorter term, right?
Okay.
So urgency you can note down if you like.
Okay, thanks a lot. So Ellen.
I haven't had a problem with my internet for most of the conference, but I just cut out then and lost the previous 2 sections. So I'm going to carry on anyway. You ask about the impact on our research of the current pandemic, and I guess we're looking at kind of 2 stages. We do a lot of work with corporates, we do a lot of work with small to medium-sized enterprises, and trying to help them envisage what their next generation of products and services are. And they're suffering from a lack from supply chains collapsing. They're suffering from their procurement gateways stopping, ceasing to trade. So I think in the short term, I'm finding it quite difficult from that perspective to work out how we can map content to try to support them. But what I am aware of is that in talking to them,
Seems like we are losing you, Ellen. Maybe you can switch off the video. Maybe this helps.
Term, and trying to stay after 2021. So in getting to January 2021, they're seeing an opportunity to reinforce quite considerably some of the grand challenges and some of the opportunities that they see in, as Henning pointed out, climate change, in biodiversity loss, in constructing local supply chains, building supply nets that are resilient. So I'm buoyed up by their own individual resilience, and I'm confident that if we're able to continue to support their approaches, we can get to 2021 and create a significant change in our economy, in the way that the global economy operates, and pays attention to some of the really important driving forces. Now, I'm mindful that I watched you all freeze a number of times in that, so I'm not sure how much of that you got.
Thanks a lot. I noted down, change the economy.
You lost a lot of it then.
Yeah, I think so. Henning, yeah, please contribute.
Yeah, I'd have a question to Joanna, maybe. So, I mean, we span a wide range here from inner work to the big global challenges of our planet, right? So I wonder how you make that connection. So this inner work, would you consider that as a necessary precondition, as part of the journey to saving us all, or already as an anticipation of already being there?
Well, I think the principle I operate with is that in our world, the digital global age is much more insecure because many of the fixed structures which we are used to are dissolving. Yeah, so our world is becoming much more complex and much more fluid in many ways. But we humans need stability in order also to be innovative. We need enough security in order to create and to grow and everything. So if we come from a place of insecurity and panic, we are regressing. We can't be creative. Given that, my foundation in a way is that I say, okay, and when we lose so much stability in the outside world, we need to get it from somewhere else. And where else can we get it if not outside? We need to get it inside ourselves. We need to be much more clearer, much better oriented within ourselves, know ourselves more, feel more. And I believe, if we would feel the world more and not only think about it, we would there would be so many things which we wouldn't do, so much harm we wouldn't inflict on each other and also on the world. Yeah, nobody would throw a can of plastic away if you would actually be there consciously, you know, and really realize what you are doing. So for me, this inner work is in a way a necessity for us humans to not only be overwhelmed by the change, the fast-paced change which we see in the world and the crisis, but to actually be able to act and you know, and to navigate in complexity and not be lost.
Okay. Great. Thanks a lot. I had a question noted down here for Klaus. Maybe everybody can contribute to it, because it seems, if I look at the time, it's kind of the last round we're already entering. So Klaus, you started your contribution by saying that the idea of sustainable development or sustainability was born out of crisis. And in a session yesterday, we had this discussion whether more like scary scenarios and scary stories are a good motivation to do something for sustainability, or if there are more positive ways of framing it, of motivating people in a very positive way. So if you have thoughts on this, everyone, please contribute and share this as a final thought before we have to finish this discussion. What might be a positive framing to move towards the next conference, how to positively frame the change we are facing, we have to face?
Yes, I think it's very important that we're not just crisis-driven and problem-driven itself. Of course, this puts a lot of pressure on us to be creative, to be innovative. But I think we also need visions, positive visions, how we want to live, how we want to produce in the future. I think that the vision of a circular economy, I think Ellen can comment on that, is a positive perspective, for example. And I also think, for me, the notion of resilience, as abstract sometimes it is, it's very concrete actually, can be a very positive vision. So, for example, to say, how can let's take the example of an economy. How can the economy be resilient and able to cope with these challenges of breakdowns of international supply chains, etc.? For example, one answer could be you should strengthen the local supply chains, and that's what partially happens. Not being against international trade, but so we have to think of these kind of things on a company level, on different levels. So I think, again, also this resilience idea can be a positive notion, and we need them.
Okay, thanks.
I'd like to chip in, if I may.
Yeah, sure, please.
I would agree with Klaus 100%. The circular economy is an enormously positive, albeit futuristic, economic model. And one of the things that really is embedded in the research in there is the idea. I think we hear a lot about the problems that we're having with the climate, the problems that we're having with biodiversity loss, the problems that we're having with social inequality. And that actually, I think it's been shown that hearing bad news doesn't change the way we behave in as much as hearing positive news. And one of the messages that comes strongly from the circular economy to me is the ability to focus on regeneration. Not focus on 20% less bad or 50% less bad or 98% less carbon, but focusing the innovations that are coming out under the mantra or the umbrella of the circular economy in the idea that we have time if we begin to regenerate. So we're not facing an Armageddon or whatever it might be, or a climate collapse or a situation in 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, which is like a diminishing clock, a reducing clock. Because if we focus on regenerating our natural environment, we focus on regenerating our soil, we focus on regenerating a range of other things, including our economic models, including our societal reward models, our workplace environment, and other things. If we focus on regeneration, it's an enormously positive message.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I think we have to wrap up. There's time for one more very short comment or thought you would like to share.
Well, there's one thing I would want to share, because I fully agree that we see amazing opportunities on the other side of the transformation, but I think they are only going to happen if we have political innovation, because businesses need incentives. They need an environment which is predictable, where people can actually create policies, for a few years in advance. And if we have an economic system which is completely skewed and which is distorted because of regulation which is not in place, then I think we're not going to get there. So for me, there is a primacy to political action right now.
Henning, half a sentence.
Yeah, I would also call for, closing this immediate connection between what Joanna addressed with respect to the inner work, considering what's important for each one of us, what's important for the place we're working in, right? And connecting these to these global goals on the political arena, on an economic arena.
Okay.
So that's how to proceed from this goodwill to good practice, like we titled our values-based innovation panel yesterday, I think it was, right?
Okay. So, dear panelists, so thanks a lot. So we already borrowed 2 minutes from the final ceremony. So thanks a lot. Very inspiring, very rich. Ian and team, for your next conference, here's the agenda: resilience, regeneration, inner balance, political innovation, and connecting, the inner and the outer world. So now you have it. So you can work with it.